November 8, 1942. The beaches of North Africa. American infantrymen pressed themselves into shallow sand ridges as German armored vehicles surge forward across the desert. Panzer tanks advance with mechanical confidence, their 75mm cannons tearing through Allied positions with terrifying ease. For the soldiers watching from the dunes, this moment represents a nightmare that military planners have feared since the first tanks rolled onto European battlefields decades earlier. Private First Class Robert Watson grips his M1 rifle and stares at the approaching steel mass. He understands the reality with absolute clarity. His rifle round, powerful against men, is meaningless against several inches of hardened armor. Every man in his platoon knows the same truth. They possess no weapon capable of stopping what is coming. None. What Watson does not know, what no American soldier on those beaches yet understands, is that strapped to the back of his sergeant is a device that will permanently change warfare. It weighs barely over 13 pounds. It costs less than $50 to produce, and it can destroy armor that previously required guns weighing dozens of tons. The weapon was created by a man with no combat experience, no military education, and no background in artillery or armored warfare. His expertise lay in farming chemistry and industrial blasting techniques, knowledge that seemed completely unrelated to the most urgent battlefield problem of the Second World War. His name was Henry Mohaupt. Only a few years earlier, he had been working alone in a makeshift laboratory in Switzerland, experimenting with explosives for mining operations. What he discovered by accident would eventually give ordinary infantrymen the power to destroy the most advanced war machines ever built. To understand why his invention mattered, it is necessary to return to the beginning of modern armored warfare. September 1, 1939. Germany invades Poland. In just over 2 weeks, German forces overwhelm Polish defenses using a new form of warfare the world would soon call blitzkrieg. Fast-moving armored columns, supported by air power, smash through defensive lines before traditional forces can respond. The lesson is unmistakable. Control of the battlefield now belongs to whoever controls armor. Existing anti-tank doctrines collapse almost immediately. Most Allied strategies are built around static defenses and heavy guns, concepts inherited from the First World War. British anti-tank weapons rely on solid steel projectiles designed to punch through armor using raw kinetic force. The physics are unforgiving. To penetrate thick armor, a projectile must be extremely heavy, extremely fast, or both. That requirement demands massive guns, heavy ammunition, and stable firing positions. The result is predictable. These weapons are slow to move, difficult to conceal, and nearly impossible to reposition once combat begins. German tank crews exploit this weakness with ruthless efficiency. They force anti-tank guns to engage at long range, where accuracy drops, then close rapidly to distances where the guns cannot track fast enough to respond. American observers draw even more disturbing conclusions. Pre-war testing reveals that the United States 37mm anti-tank gun struggles badly against modern armor. Effective penetration requires dangerously close ranges, distances where enemy tanks can easily destroy the gun before it fires enough shots to matter. Scientists search desperately for solutions. Others attempt to increase gun size and propellant strength. German success with the feared 88mm gun demonstrates the idea works, but at enormous cost. The weapon weighs many tons and requires heavy vehicles just to move it. By 1940, expert consensus settles on an uncomfortable conclusion. Effective anti-tank weapons must be large, expensive, and inflexible. Infantry soldiers will never be able to stop tanks on their own. This belief dominates military thinking everywhere, except in one small Swiss workshop. Henry Mohaupt was born in 1915 in a quiet village outside Zurich. His father worked as an industrial chemist specializing in mining explosives, filling the family home with discussions about blast behavior and rock fracturing. Explosives were not weapons to young Henry, they were tools. He struggled academically and pursued vocational training as an electromechanic. His brief military service passed without distinction. Nothing about his early life suggested he would influence global warfare. In the mid-1930s, working as a technical chemist, Mohaupt began experimenting with explosives for mining efficiency. His goal was simple. He wanted to fracture rock precisely without wasting energy or damaging valuable material. During one routine experiment, he placed a small explosive charge inside a cone-shaped metal container. He expected the blast to disperse outward. Instead, the explosion focused into a narrow, violent jet that punched straight through steel. The effect contradicted everything he had been taught. Scientists had known about this phenomenon for decades, but regarded it as a laboratory curiosity with no practical application. Mohaupt did not see a curiosity. He saw a solution. Traditional weapons relied on speed and mass. His discovery relied on focus. A shaped explosive charge could channel energy into a jet of molten metal, moving at extraordinary velocity, capable of piercing armor regardless of the weapon's size. The implications were staggering. A lightweight charge could outperform guns weighing thousands of pounds. This insight changed everything. Mohaupt refined his designs using trial and error, melting copper, shaping liners by hand, and testing penetration repeatedly. He lacked formal weapons training, but he possessed something equally powerful. How does one man's wild idea, something that sounds like it's straight out of a comic book, end up changing the face of modern warfare? Today, we're diving into the incredible, almost unbelievable story of Henry Mohaupt, the unlikely genius behind one of World War II's most iconic weapons, the bazooka. And let me tell you, it's a tale of innovation, desperation, and a little bit of backyard engineering that packed a massive punch. Our story begins not on a battlefield, but in the quiet world of science and engineering. Henry Mohaupt was a Swiss chemical engineer who immigrated to the United States in 1930. He was a weapons designer by trade. His expertise lay in high-explosive projectiles. He was fascinated by the Monroe effect, a principle discovered back in the 1880s by Charles Monroe. The idea is simple, but revolutionary. If you shape an explosive charge with a hollow cavity, it focuses the blast's energy into a super-hot, super-fast jet of molten metal. This jet can slice through steel armor like a hot knife through butter. For decades, it was a cool scientific curiosity, but nobody had figured out how to weaponize it effectively. Mohaupt was determined to change that. He spent years tinkering with this concept, developing what became known as the shaped charge. He created a grenade with a conical hollow in its explosive filling. When this grenade hit a target, it would unleash a focused jet of plasma that could penetrate several inches of solid steel. This was a game changer. Imagine a small handheld explosive that could take out a heavily armored tank. The potential was enormous. By the late 1930s, with the world teetering on the brink of war, Mohammed brought his invention to the U.S. Army Ordnance Department. The top brass were intrigued. They could see the value in a powerful anti-tank weapon that a single soldier could carry. At the time, their main anti-tank weapons were heavy, cumbersome cannons, or the M10 grenade, a 3.5-pound beast that a soldier had to physically place on a tank. Not exactly a great strategy if you want to live to tell the tale. The Army gave Mohammed the green light to develop his idea further. He was teamed up with a U.S. Army officer, Colonel Leslie Skinner. Here's where the story gets really interesting. They had the warhead, this powerful shaped charge grenade, designated the M10. The problem was, how do you get it to the tank safely and accurately? The M10 was too heavy to be thrown like a regular grenade. They tried developing a spigot mortar, a rifle attachment that would launch the grenade. But this rifle grenade was clunky, had a massive recoil that could break a soldier's shoulder, and just wasn't reliable. The project was on the verge of being scrapped. The team was getting desperate. Then came the moment of pure, unadulterated genius. During a demonstration of the failing rifle grenade in 1942, Colonel Skinner noticed a pile of scrap metal nearby. Among the junk was a simple 5-foot-long metal tube. A thought sparked in his mind. He looked at the tube, then at the M10 grenade. He had an idea. What if they launched the grenade from inside the tube, using a rocket motor? Skinner, being a resourceful army man, grabbed the tube. He and Mohammed quickly attached some wires from a battery to the rocket motor of a practice M10 grenade, slapped a simple sight on the tube, and loaded the round. This impromptu creation was a Frankenstein's monster of spare parts. It was just a tube, a stock, and some wires. It looked ridiculous. In fact, it looked so much like a bizarre musical instrument from a popular 1930s radio show, played by comedian Bob Burns, that the soldiers present immediately nicknamed it the Bazooka, and the name stuck. Skinner shouldered the strange contraption. He aimed at a moving tank target and fired. There was a whoosh of smoke and a flash of flame. The rocket-propelled grenade flew through the air and slammed into the tank, blowing a hole straight through its armor. The onlookers were stunned into silence. Then the silence erupted into cheers. It worked. It actually worked. They had just invented the world's first shoulder-fired rocket launcher, right there on the spot, using a piece of scrap metal. General Gladian Barnes, the head of Army Research, was at the demonstration. He was so impressed that he immediately ordered the bazooka into production, reportedly saying, "I want that man killer, and I want it yesterday." This was unprecedented. The weapon went from a scrapyard prototype to mass production in just 30 days. It was a testament to the urgency of the war and the sheer brilliance of the design. The M1A1 bazooka was officially born. It was a simple weapon, a 60-inch steel tube that could be broken down into 2 parts for easy carrying. It was fired by a two-man team, a gunner who aimed and fired, and a loader who slapped a new rocket into the back. It was lightweight, relatively cheap to produce, and incredibly effective. A single soldier could now hold the power to destroy a 30-ton Panzer tank from a safe distance. The bazooka made its combat debut in North Africa during Operation Torch in late 1942. The German tank crews got a nasty surprise. Their seemingly invincible panzers were suddenly being knocked out by infantrymen. hiding in ditches and buildings. The psychological impact was huge. The Panzer terror that had dominated the early years of the war was broken. German intelligence reports scrambled to understand this new American rocket gun. They were so impressed that they captured several bazookas and reverse-engineered them, creating their own version, the much larger and more powerful Panzerschreck, which literally translates to tank fright. The bazooka's influence spread throughout the war. It was used on every front, from the jungles of the Pacific to the frozen forests of the Ardennes. It gave infantry squads a fighting chance against armor, completely changing battlefield tactics. No longer did they have to rely on air support or heavy artillery to deal with tanks. The power was in their hands. Soldiers developed new tactics, setting up bazooka traps and ambushes, turning the hunters into the hunted. General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself listed the bazooka as one of the 4 tools of victory that won the war for the Allies. Alongside the atomic bomb, the Jeep, and the C-47 transport plane, that's how important it was. But what about Henry Mohoppet, the man who started it all? After the war, he continued his work in ordnance and explosives, his genius contributing to many other military advancements. He never became a household name like Oppenheimer or Einstein, but his invention, born from a scientific principle and brought to life with a bit of battlefield improvisation, saved countless lives and helped turn the tide of the biggest conflict in human history. The legacy of the bazooka is immense. It was the grandfather of all modern shoulder-fired anti-tank weapons, like the RPG-27 and the Javelin missile. The core concept, a man-portable launcher, firing a shaped charge rocket, remains the standard for anti-armor infantry weapons to this day. It democratized anti-tank warfare, giving the individual soldier a power they'd never had before. So, the next time you see a war movie and a soldier pulls out a rocket launcher, remember the story of Henry Mohoppet and Colonel Skinner. Remember that this incredible piece of technology was unborn in a high-tech lab, but on a firing range, from a pile of scrap metal and a brilliant, desperate idea. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest innovations come from the simplest solutions, and that one person's vision, combined with a little bit of ingenuity, can truly change the world. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales from history. Let me know in the comments what other inventions you'd like to hear about. See you in the next one.